Yes, welcome everyone. Cannabis News, another edition. I'm your host, Joe Klare. It's June 5th, 2019. The show, as always, is presented by the Marijuana Times. Check us out at marijuanatimes.org. Click the video tab there to find this show. A bunch of great articles there from a lot of great writers and more. marijuanatimes.org. Today, we're talking about the pace of federal marijuana law reform. Also, federal court orders the DEA to get cracking, as it were, when it comes to these petitions for reclassification, and Canada's edibles market. Is it coming soon? What will it do? What will happen? Will it be the end of life as we know it when legally sold edibles flood the Canadian plains? I don't know. We'll see. All that's coming up. But first, of course, Cannabis News is brought to you by Natureside, nature-side.com, and their organic, all-natural pesticides. Make sure you grow safe and poison-free. Don't use harmful chemicals. Don't use banned pesticides, and be regulatory compliant in the state that you are growing in. Do all of these things with Natureside. Nature-side.com, a proud sponsor of Cannabis News. Thank you, Natureside. This first story by yours truly at marijuanatimes.org. Should we be disappointed by the pace of federal marijuana law reform? I got a chance to talk with Don Murphy, who's the Director of Federal Policies for the Marijuana Policy Project, about the pace of federal law reform. As I mentioned in the article, in print and in this show especially, I fight the urge to be cynical. I'm a naturally cynical person. But again, as I point out in the article, if I would just sit here and say, oh, this sucks, or we're screwed, or things are never going to get better, and this is awful, it gets annoying, it gets boring, it gets sometimes a combination of those two things. I don't want that to be this show. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to gloss over the progress that is made, and I try to make a conscious effort every story, every show, to do that and to recognize the progress that's been made. Having said that, there's also room to say, hey, a lot of things went our way, this past election. Pete Sessions is gone, Jeff Sessions is gone, Democrats took control of the House, and so far still, as of this recording, we have one bill that's passed one committee in the Democrat-controlled House. I don't think that's enough. Don agreed with me. Obviously, coming from the same angle. We should recognize the progress that's been made, while also recognizing that there's a long way to go. I mean, if you have a very, very long road and you've gone, 20% of that road, you can look back and say, wow, that 20%, that's fantastic. But you also have to keep your mind on the 80% that's still to come and figure out how you're going to accomplish that. And so far, I don't know. I really have to fight my cynical side on this issue. It's June. I know it's early. I know, there's the Trump versus Democrats battle, impeachment, and resistance, and so on and so forth. I understand all that. But this is your job, after all. If you're a legislator in the federal Congress, in the U.S. House of Representatives, this is your job to sponsor, vocalize support for, push forward legislation that you agree with. And a lot of you say that you agree with marijuana law reform. Well, here, this is it. My imaginary watch is ticking. This is now. If you're in the House, look, if it don't get past the Senate, okay. If President Trump vetoes it, if it does get past the Senate, that's all these things would be expected. But to not even get to the floor of the House for a vote, we complained for years. Oh, Pete Sessions has been keeping all these bills from the floor of the House. Well, maybe it wasn't all Pete Sessions because it's June and there's still no bills to the floor of the House. So maybe it wasn't just Pete Sessions, and maybe there's some other problems that have to be surmounted, and maybe we should get to surmounting them. Post haste, as the kids say. Come back to my watch, my fake watch. Just run out of time. The clock is ticking. Any case, moving on. MarijuanaMoment.net is where this next story comes from. Federal court orders DEA to promptly consider marijuana rescheduling or else. Many of you may remember the story of the federal lawsuit filed on behalf of people like Alexis Bortel, the young child who uses medical marijuana, and among a bunch of other people. We've talked about on this show, and it's also been talked about in print on Marijuana Times, marijuanatimes.org. Now a federal appeals court gave medical cannabis patients and reform advocates a small but significant procedural victory, ruling that it would hold open a case challenging the scheduling status of marijuana under federal law. In essence, the court is putting the federal government on notice that it must, quote-unquote, promptly make a decision on marijuana rescheduling so that those who rely on its medical benefits don't unduly suffer. Basically, what the court said was last year, what they said was that these plaintiffs would have to exhaust all the administrative processes through the DEA before they could bring a suit like this. They're still saying that. This group of patients is and advocates. They filed a lawsuit against the Justice Department and the U.S. District Court in 2017. They allege that the Schedule I status of cannabis under the Controlled Substances Act poses serious health risks and unfair economic disadvantages. So they say that they still should have went through all the administrative processes, but they also point out that the DEA is very slow when it comes to getting these things done. U.S. Circuit Court Judge Guido Calabresi wrote for the majority, quote, "We are troubled by the DEA's history of dilatory proceedings. Accordingly, while we concur with the district court's ruling, we do not dismiss the case, but rather hold it in abeyance and retain jurisdiction in this panel to take whatever action might become appropriate if the DEA does not act with adequate dispatch." So basically what they're saying is plaintiffs go through the administrative process, and we're going to be watching, and if the DEA doesn't respond to that administrative process in a timely manner, DEAs can sometimes take 8, 10, 12 years to rule on a rescheduling petition, that if the DEA is not on it, then the court will revisit this issue, and if there's a problem, in the vein of Vanilla Ice, they will solve it. Sorry, I heard that song earlier. It's stuck in my head as we speak. Ice Ice Baby. It's really brutal. I mean, it's a catchy enough song. I mean, if you ever heard Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice, but it's burrowed in my head like a something that burrows, like a burrowing animal. It's in my head. But I continue. As I've said before, it doesn't matter what kind of illness or ailment affects me. I'm going to get through this show no matter what, 5 days a week, right here on marijuanatimes.org/story. You probably have the song now in your head. You're welcome. From globalnews.ca out of Canada. Canada's cannabis edibles topicals market could be worth $2.7 billion a year after legalization, according to a new study. The report estimates that more than $1.6 billion will be spent annually on edibles and about $529 million on cannabis-infused drinks, while topicals, concentrates, tinctures, and capsules will combine for another $400 million in sales. They're still working on getting edibles regulated and legalized in Canada. The report says the legalization of edibles could lead to new products that would appeal to novice cannabis-curious consumers. Jennifer Lee Delawate, I know I butchered that. Delawate? I don't know. They did the report in the study. Jennifer Lee with Delawate said, quote, "The introduction of cannabis-infused edibles will clearly threaten the alcohol industry as consumers are using the product for similar usage occasions." They're still working on getting, it's supposed to be October 17th when the edibles were to be legalized. Apparently, they're supposed to do it a year after marijuana legalization itself and retail sales began in Canada, but that has not happened yet. So we will continue to follow that story. Ottawa has indicated that edibles containing cannabis and cannabis concentrates will become legal for consumers in October, as I just mentioned. But the exact timing, wow, why didn't I didn't change that graphic. I've been staring at that picture instead of staring at me, who should be staring at. I don't know. Maybe many of you are grateful for the respite. But, be that as it may, they're supposed to become legal for consumers in October, but the exact timing of product approvals and sales is still unknown. So what happens in Canada with edibles remains to be seen. Obviously, edibles are a big market wherever legalization would come to, because while it's easy to fill a bowl or pack a bowl or a bong chamber, or even for a lot of people to roll joints or blunts or whatever, not as many people are going to go through the effort of making tinctures or edibles or topicals or things of that nature. And they would go for those things and want to consume those things if they could just go buy them pre-made. Like I've often said, if you can make Twinkies in your house and that's the only way you can get a Twinkie, a lot less people would eat Twinkies. But since Twinkies are at the store, did they bring Twinkies back? Maybe that's a bad analogy. Brownies, just regular old brownies. I'll go with something I know still exists. Brownies. You want to get regular brownies, if you had to make them at home, that's the only way you could get them. A lot less people would eat brownies. But you can just go to the store and buy them, well, then more people will eat brownies. Take that effort away, and they just give you a little bit of money, and they can walk away with brownies. Well, marijuana edibles and such work the same way. So, Canada, I know it's a struggle. I've read a lot of stories, even stories I haven't covered here, struggling to get legalization going. Government interference is a major problem, and will continue to be so. Because as much as the government loves to interfere in the United States, they love it even more in Canada. It's like their national pastime. It's their baseball. Thanks everybody for checking out the show. Cannabis news. You're awesome. Keep spreading the truth about cannabis with this show. Check us out on Apple Podcasts for the audio version. Search the Marijuana Times. Subscribe to us on YouTube as well. Click that notification bell so you know when a new episode of Cannabis News has dropped. Thanks for watching and listening today, and we'll see you next time right here on Cannabis News.